or the ones that we have this morning, we're turning ahead of time, so we had some time to do a little extra research or think about them a little bit more. And so we'll go through these, and then we'll see how much time we have left. And if anybody has any questions, we'll do our best to answer them on the spot, or we'll just defer to somebody else in the crowd that knows more than we do. So there's plenty of you out there. But again, thanks for being here over these weeks. We pray that it's been helpful for you, and that really coming out of this as a family, you guys will take some action steps. You'll take some measures to make sure that you and your kids are protected from the negative influence of technology. And not all tech is bad, and we've said that over and over during this class. We can use it for good, certainly, and we'll talk even a little bit more about that today. But there's obviously a lot of negative sides to technology and media, and so hopefully you guys will take some steps there. If nothing else, you can always come and talk to us. Again, there's plenty of other people. We got to hear from Andy and Wayne. We got to hear from the McMillans on how they do some things. And so there's plenty of other people in this room, in our church, that can help you if you're struggling in those areas. And so, again, remember, the greatest resource you have is the church. It's the Word of God. It's the Holy Spirit. So make sure you're relying on those things before you take any of our advice. All right, let's just put it that way. We did our best to take a biblical approach to the topic. Most weeks, we had a verse or two in there. It wasn't Bible heavy because a lot of the same biblical advice applies to technology as it does anything else. And so we just tried to share some of those things, whether it's with parenting or whether Josh talked a lot about guarding your eyes and your mind and those types of things. And so a lot of those principles are based in Scripture, but the Bible doesn't necessarily talk about social media and those things. And so we did our best to take those biblical principles and reiterate them week to week. But a lot of it was obviously information heavy from what our kids are going through today. And so hopefully you guys were able to see that and you're able to use those biblical principles that we pointed out. But let's go ahead and get into the questions for today. So some of these, both Josh and I will answer. Some of them, just Josh will answer, or just I'll answer. But the first one, I think, actually, can you throw it up there, Landon? Okay, so how to use parental controls. And then these people, whoever asked this question, they just kind of listed what devices they use, what they have. And so we'll do our best to answer those. But do you want to start first with that one? So,
I think, Craig, you have a slide, too, for Bark
yes,
as well. So there are websites. I'm stealing this from Craig, stealing your thunder. Barkomatic. You can go there. A site like that will help you out a lot. But as a former IT professional, working with computers for 15 years, I'll give you the secret of how we learn a lot of things. We just Google it. So people will be like, oh, how'd you figure that out? And you're like, oh, we did research. That meant we Googled it. And so there's just a lot of things that you can just Google. So like if you have an Xbox One, you can just Google Xbox One's parent control, and you'll find video after video after video, and they'll just walk you through how to set it up. Same thing with your PS5, 4, whatever you have, your Switch. And so really, if you just Google whatever you have, you can just go through, and there's just step-by-step guides on how you can set up everything. That goes for your iPhone with all that stuff. And so a lot of those have really good parent controls, and there's so many devices and so many things out there. We couldn't cover them all. But, the sites like this, or just simply Googling it, we talked about how do you redeem technology. Well, you can kind of redeem it by using it to help you lock all your children out of their devices. It's a fun thing to do. It does take time, and so I would say, I think we kind of talked about this, but maybe you haven't locked your kids out, or maybe you're thinking, oh my goodness, what do you do? Like I think Craig talked about it. Maybe was it last week? Just kind of take an inventory of the stuff that you have, what devices you have, and just start going through them one by one. And so I think sometimes it's overwhelming in today's world. We have so much technology in our homes. We have TVs. Maybe it's just me, but we have TVs, Switches, Xboxes, and phones and all this stuff. Well, just kind of take inventory of what you have and just go through step by step of how to do it. And if you don't know how to do it and you Google it and you're like, oh my goodness, this is so overwhelming, just come talk to me or Craig or Andy or Wayne or someone like that.
Yeah, and so just what I would add to that is the thing with some of these devices is, a PS5, a Switch, an Xbox. They're not like Nintendo, Super Nintendo, Sega, whatever. These are full-blown computers. Many of them have some sort of web browsing even, and so they're not just playing games on those devices. They have access to a lot more than that, and so make sure that you're aware of that and you're taking steps to protect them there. But just some, I guess, some guidelines that I would give when it comes to setting up parental controls is first, determine what's best for your family depending on your kid's age, right? If you have young kids and you have some gaming consoles, you want to lock a lot of that stuff down, not just the rating of the games that they're playing, but they don't need to be getting into the settings. They certainly don't need to be getting into the web browser side of those things. You need to figure out, what devices they have access to, those types of things. And so just figure out what's best for your family. So younger kids, I would always suggest fewer screens is better for younger kids. As they get older, they may have school-issued devices. They may have a phone. They may have a tablet, or they may game. They may have computers, whatever. So figure out what's best for your family, depending on your kid's age, and you determine kind of what kind of controls you want to put on them, what you want them to be able to access on those devices. And then what I would do is I would explain at an appropriate level what parental controls are and why you're setting them. All right, so if your kids haven't had any limits on their devices, and then they show up one day after school and everything requires a PIN and everything's locked down or whatever, that's you're going to have a fight on your hands then, basically, with your kids. And so explain to your kids, hey, whether it's from this class or whatever, hey, we've been going through this lately, and we don't think it's best that you have access to all these things, and so we're going to limit these devices. We're going to limit these things. And again, that's going to be different for your kids' ages. So maybe you're saying, hey, we're only going to watch 30 minutes of TV, or you can only play video games for an hour a day, or whatever it is, or not during the week, only on weekends, whatever. But you're going to explain to your kids at an appropriate level what parental controls are and why you're setting them. And then you'll set the appropriate level of restriction on those devices for the kids. And so think about, what websites would you like to keep blocked, or unblocked, I should say, and why. So you're going to explain to those kids, hey, listen, right now you have access to YouTube. We're going to block YouTube because there's a lot of content on there that, we don't want you to come across, that we want to protect you from, whatever it is. You're going to explain to them why you're doing this. It's not just to, no fun zone in our home, so you want to explain to them, set those expectations for your kids. And then another thing, especially if they're a little older, maybe you ask them what they think is an appropriate amount of time to spend on their phone, on their tablet, on their computer, playing video games or whatever. Ask them what they think is an appropriate amount of time. Because sometimes, honestly, they might only think, an hour a day is enough for me. But they end up playing 3 hours a day because it's easy to get lost when you're playing a game and time gets away from you, especially when you're younger and you have fewer responsibilities, you're not as good at time management or whatever. That time gets away from them, and so they might not even realize how much time they're spending playing video games. Maybe they'll say 3 hours, and you're like, no, that's ridiculous, absolutely not. And then you enter into setting expectations for your kids. So we're going to limit it to 1 hour a day or whatever. And so, but ask them, get their input, because ideally, especially if they've been in this class, hopefully they've seen some of the effects, and hopefully they'll want to take some action in their own lives to mitigate that influence in their life. And so asking them what they would want to do would be a good, ultimately you're the parent though, and so you have the final say. But especially for those older kids, just shutting them down, blocking everything, will not go well for you, especially if they've had that access up until this point. So, talk to them, get their input. Once you've determined the appropriate settings, set clear expectations for your kids on what they can use, how long they can use it, what will happen if they push back once the limits have been reached, or if they break agreed upon rules. And so, again, so some stuff you can set a timer and it just shuts off after that much time has been spent, and that's great. Then the kids kind of, you spent your hour playing video games and it shut off. You knew that was coming, But if it's just like almost a verbal agreement, or there's a lot of parent-child phone contracts out there that you can look at, and there's pros and cons to doing those as well. But you need to communicate what those expectations are if they break what you guys have agreed upon. If they, fuss and whine, like, I don't want you whining whenever it's time to get off your video game. If you do, then that means, tomorrow, no video games or whatever. So you communicate those expectations and you stick to them. Whenever you set those boundaries in your kids' lives, that's a proof of your love for them. Kids need boundaries, and the reason that they're always pushing back on the boundaries that we set for them is because they're testing how much we love them. And so every time you give in to those boundaries that you've set, your kids realizing, okay, well, you really don't. They wouldn't articulate it this way, but you don't really love me as much as you say you do because you said this, but you're giving in on this. So whatever it is that you set, make sure you stick to those parameters, okay? So set up the controls, like Josh said. Bark-O-Matic is the best resource I can send you to. If you can't find what you need there, you can Google it, find it somewhere else. The other thing is to set the example. So if you're limiting your child to 1 hour of screen time in the evening, then you should not be sitting there for 3 hours on your phone, while they have to go read a book, okay? Like, get off your phone, go read a book, and then you're there scrolling through whatever. Again, the theme that you'll see over and over again, or that you've seen through this class, is to be the example yourself. And then I would suggest to provide some alternatives and some incentives. So give them something else to do. So you might have to invest in books. You might have to invest in games. You might have to spend some energy coming up with ideas and working through stuff with them. You might have to help them develop a new hobby, a new interest, something other than technology, and then giving them an incentive. So I talked about, I'm paying Emma to read books, so something to that sort, or maybe reading is tied to their screen time, and so you read an hour, you get an hour of screen time. That's just, or something like that. So anyways, just some other thoughts when it comes to parental controls. And as far as your specific devices, you'll have to look those up. So, okay. And again, what we'll do is we'll go through this, and if there's any questions on even what we just said, if we have time, we'll cover those at the end. Okay, I think the next question is for Josh. There you go. How do handheld?
All right.
Oh, you go ahead.
How do they compare? So I could take all day to answer this question, so I'm going to try to keep it brief. As far as level of addiction, I think they all obviously have a level of addiction. With my kids, I know when it comes to TV and it comes to video games, if I let them, they would play video games all day while watching TV. It's kind of a trend that we have that we've really been trying to work on, because, like, why do you need to play a video game and watch a TV? Like, you don't really have to. And then, as Craig said, setting the example, well, I can do the same thing. So I can watch TV and play a video game on my phone. And so I say all that to say, like, it's very easy to be, I think, especially for our kids, to become addicted to a TV and a video game. And just, 3 hours is reasonable for my kids to play video games in their mind. It really is. We think it's crazy, but I'm sure if I asked my oldest, how long do you want to play video games? It would be like, well, all day, every day would probably be his answer. And so it's very easy for, I think, our kids just to pick up a video game in our culture because it's such the norm and just start playing. Well, I'm bored, especially in Ohio, whenever, you go outside and your entire yard is solid ice for 2 weeks. Like, what else do you do? Well, we told our kids to go out and do an ice skating rink. We created alternatives, and 2 of our 3 kids bashed their head off the ice. So I don't know. I don't know if that was
I mean,
the
there's
best.
there's risks to everything.
Gabe came in bleeding with the whole side. I was like, oh boy. But hey, he was playing video games. Go play. Yeah. So it's like, so what do you? But no, I mean, really, they can become addicted to that kind of stuff. But I think what you're starting to see is the smartphone is probably the biggest concern for addiction, because, I mean, if we were all honest, and how many of us have a smartphone in our pocket right now? Right now I have a tablet and a smartphone within this vicinity, and so you can watch TV on your smartphone, you can play video games on your smartphone, and then also people are addicted to pornography and all the stuff that we've been talking about, and it's all on your smartphone for the most part, because if you just look, those numbers are growing and growing every year. Video gaming, pornography, TV, and all that stuff is watched more and more just on our smartphones and on our kids' smartphones. And so as you know, obviously the battle is video games and TVs at home, but like the crazy thing is in our world is that, you know, we have kids and younger, they're just walking around with their smartphones. And so I think that becomes extremely addictive to our kids, and you can see it in youth ministry, you can see it in kids ministry, just the effects of all that stuff, because our kids just want to be on their phone. And so I think if we're just looking at it, I think the worst would probably be the smartphone, because it's with us all the time. And so setting those guidelines is really important, and helping our kids understand that, yeah, like, you can do all these things at home and you can do them on the smartphone, but we have to help guide them on why not to, because this world, man, this world is designed to get your kids to watch TV. They make money on that. It's designed to play video games. They make money on it. It's designed to do all those things because the world wants your kids to watch it. And, you know, we talked about algorithms, and it's like, man, keep coming back for more. And so we have to help, I think, protect our kids from that, because obviously the world's going in a different direction. And if kids go to school and most of their friends are just on their smartphones 24/7. And so we need to be able to share with our kids, like, man, this is why you don't do it, because it does affect you. It affects your relationship with the Lord and all those things. So of the three, I would say the worst probably would be the smartphone. And the one that's probably it's kind of sneaky, because I don't know if we always think about it that way, but you can be addicted to so many things just from your smartphone. I mean, it's crazy. You can just be addicted to your smartphone and just like to swipe. And we talked a lot about that in the videos. And so, but obviously TV and games, like I said, my kids, they don't have smartphones, but they would play video games all day long, every day if we let them. So we try to encourage them to go hit their heads on the ice.
You know, alternatives. You got to provide some alternatives.
Listen, accidents happen.
No, actually, it was something that Josh said that reminded me. I don't know if I've shared it here. One of the I don't know, I guess, rules that I've tried to implement in my own life is one screen at a time. And so, you know, I can sit and watch TV and be on my phone or my tablet or whatever and not really paying fully attention to either one. And so one of the things that I've tried to do in my own life, I haven't always, since this class has started, and I have not been successful all the time, but is one screen at a time. So if I'm watching something on TV, watch the TV. If I'm doing something on my phone, you know, do whatever it is on my phone. But there's no reason for me to have both going on at the same time.
Which shows you how addicted to devices we actually are.
Yes.
Because it's crazy to think, like, I do the same thing. Like, I've missed entire halves of football games and be like, well, I mean, how did the Browns, like, start losing 21-0? Like, I missed it all because I was kind of watching that and kind of on my phone. And so it's very easy to not only be addicted just to your phone when you're sitting at your house, but, man, you're watching TV and you're just bouncing around everywhere. Like, in the past, I don't know if I should admit this, but I have been on my phone playing a video game and watching a TV, a basketball game before. This was years ago. I'm a reformed addict of screens. But I've done all three before. It's impressive, I know. And it's also very embarrassing. But, like, I've been like, oh, I'll be on my phone, and, ooh, the screen's loading, and, oh, I wonder how the Cavs are doing over here. And, like, that's a problem. And so our kid...
That's why we have you here today, Josh. We've been wanting to talk to you.
I've realized it. But listen, like, if I can do it, our kids certainly can do it. And so we just have to help our kids understand the dangers of it all.
Yeah, and I think there is this lure to multitasking. So the idea that you always have to be doing something and get more done or whatever. And, you know, studies have shown that multitasking is a myth. It actually doesn't save you time. It takes you more time. So whether you're at work or whatever, not just while you're on your phone and watching TV, but your brain having to jump. We talked about it a little bit in class. Your brain having to jump from one task to another. Then it kind of needs to ramp up to that task. And you feel like you're getting more done, but ultimately if you would just focus on the task at hand, complete it, move to the next one, it would save you time. And so, you know, multitasking is a myth, but I know that's what I feel sometimes. I'm like, man, I can be watching this and, you know, figure out what's going on in the world or whatever. So, anyways, just be aware of those things. Next question. Okay, so how do we battle against the school's constant use of technology? This person wrote, we limit but find the kids have free time at school and are encouraged to play games, and other kids show them how to get to unblock games and YouTube. So this is a good question because, at least for me, this is something that I've become more aware of just from doing this class and looking at mainly Emma's school-assigned tech use and being concerned about that. So just a few thoughts on this. As first is, your kids are going to encounter technology. It's inevitable. And so like we've seen the last couple of weeks, the internal values that you instill in your kids are going to be greater than the external limits. And so because you can't always control their exposure to tech, you can do your best, but eventually they will come across it, and it will be unsupervised and unblocked or whatever, whether it's at school, whether it's when you're away, or if they're at a friend's house or on the bus or whatever. Just plan on that day coming when they're going to be exposed to it, and pray, first of all, that they're not exposed to anything harmful. But if they are, you need to have already prepared them for what to do, what to expect in an age-appropriate way, and make sure that they have those internal values, and then you can. But that's true in anything in life, really, when they come across it, whether it's drugs or alcohol or relationships or whatever you prepare them for is how they'll respond. Bullying, friendship, respecting their teachers, whatever it is, those moments in their life are gonna come. They're gonna encounter those, and however you have taught them to respond to those things, or if you've taught them your view on those things, then most likely that's how they'll respond in that moment. And the same is true for technology. And so they have this free time at school to get on their computers, and just make sure that you're preparing them for that time when you aren't there. Because I'm not saying that teachers are negligent, but to monitor what 25 kids are doing on their laptop is near impossible. And so you have to make sure that you're preparing your own kid, because the truth is, in every controversial area of life, your kids are going to have to encounter it on their own at some point. And so they'll respond the way that you've prepared them to respond. And so make sure you're doing your part at home. What you teach them about the subject will shape their experience with it. So the first thing I would recommend is to teach them, set the example when it comes to their relationship with technology at home first. Okay? So make sure you're doing your part. Because again, you are responsible to raise your kids, right? So you might send them to school to hope that the school teaches them math or social studies or whatever, but ultimately you're responsible for your kids. The same is true for church, right? So if you're dropping them off with us, expecting us to spiritually raise your kids, then you're going to be held accountable for that. And so you are responsible to raise your kids when it comes to their spiritual life, when it comes to their health, right? You don't just take them to the doctor every once in a while and expect the doc to handle everything. Daily, you're making sure that their health is taken care of, and so on and so forth, right? So all those areas, you are responsible for your kids in every area of life. Do not rely on school. Do not rely on the doctor. Certainly don't rely on society or culture. Don't even rely on the church to do those things for you. Now, we have the privilege of partnering with you, but it is not our main responsibility when it comes to the kid. It's yours. So make sure you're doing your part. But all that to say, there is some things I believe you can do for your kid concerning the school. So I know that tech's influence on our kids seems like a constant fight, but do not approach the school with this attitude. So just the way that this person worded the question is, how do we battle against the school's constant use of technology? And so I get what they're saying, because it is a constant fight with our kids. But I would encourage you, don't approach the school like you're looking for a fight with the school, okay? Because like the church, we want to partner with you. We want to help you. And ultimately, the school should be partnering with you as the parents to teach your kids to handle that. So to approach the school like you want to partner with them. So do I think that all screen time at school is intentional, though, as what I would allow at home? No, certainly not. Do I agree with the way the school introduces tech to my child or appreciate everything that they teach them about it? No. But my greatest chance at changing this is not fighting the school, but partnering with the school. And so again, as I said, doing this class, I've become more aware of it with Emma, and I feel like even just this year, there's been more tech use in the third grade for her, and so just this is what I've done, and maybe you guys have some better suggestions. But so basically, I check Emma's Chromebook. She gets a school-issued Chromebook. I asked her to show me how to log in. I asked her to show me what games she plays, what assignments she has on it, and so she's usually happy to do that. She's telling me about some typing game that they did in tech class, and I was like, oh, on the way home from school, I said, oh, great, will you show me it? Yeah, she's excited to show it to me. And so ask your kids to show you, what they're up to, what their assignments are. And then I check it. I just start getting into every corner of it that I can. And it's pretty well locked down. But I'm monitoring what Emma's using. I give her other options. So like at this free time that they have at the end of the day, sometimes they're just encouraged to pull out their Chromebook and get on it and do whatever. But I give her other options. So we actually came across this little travel magnetic checkers set that we have. And so I threw that in her backpack. I said, here, play this with a friend. Teach your friend how to play checkers and play with them. And she takes her book with her that she's reading through right now, the Magic Treehouse series. And so she's reading through that at times. I bought this little pamphlet or this little stack of like paper games. So you guys know like dots and squares. It's just a grid of dots, and you draw a line. When someone completes a box, you write their initial in it. Whoever has the most boxes once the thing's filled wins. And so I taught her how to play that, and I encouraged her to teach her friends tic-tac-toe. There was a stack on Amazon that had like 5 different paper games, so I sent her with some of those. And so I just give her some other options, some things to do during that free time, so she doesn't just automatically pull out her Chromebook when she has a minute. The other thing then I did is I contacted her principal. So I actually emailed the principal. I said, hey, I have some questions and concerns about Emma's tech use and web access. Who can I talk to? I didn't want to just dump it all on her principal. And so the principal responded, though, and said, I can help you with some of that. What are your concerns? What are your questions? And so, okay. So I typed up everything that I was concerned about. And, I've got that list of things. So, like, YouTube wasn't blocked. And to be fair, I think there's some separate firewalls in place on the school's network. So I don't know what would be blocked at the school that would be available at my house. But all I have is, my network. And so I'm just trying to find what I can get to. And so, I just listed these concerns. Emma wants to be an artist, so I thought, okay, what's something harmless that she would Google? So I Googled art. The first web page that popped up on Google is art.com, which sells poster prints. And within 2 clicks, I could get to the nude category of the poster website. So I explained that. I told her, this is something that she can easily get to. That typing game that they were doing in class, you sign in with your Google account, and you can request friends from strangers. And so, I told her that. I said, I'm concerned about this, and then I had some questions for her as well. And so, but I was able to do that because I spent some time snooping around on her Chromebook, trying to figure out what can she get herself into innocently. And so I did all that, and I sent it to her principal, and so she thanked me for it. She said she's passing it along to the tech department, and the other thing is that, there's this entire IT department. I was talking to Josh about this, who used to work in an IT department.
Don't yell at your IT people. They won't
so they're
fix it.
understaffed, overworked. They're dealing with a whole school district, not just for some third graders access to YouTube, but trying to keep the teachers on point, high schoolers who use it more. You're trying to take care of all of these things, and so so just keep that in mind as well. So again, if you approach it like you want to partner with them, and so I kept offering if I can come in and talk to anybody. I told them about this class. I said I'm happy to help partner with the school however I can. I'm not looking for you to do everything, because I said I believe as a parent it's my responsibility as well. So that's why I'm reaching out to you. So I'm not blaming them, and I'm letting them know I'm here to help. I want to partner, but I'm bringing all these things to their attention. And so that's just, I haven't heard back yet, because she said, thank you, I'll forward it. She's out of the office till like Tuesday or something, so I don't expect an answer back till later this week. But anyways, so what I would say make sure you're doing your part at home, and make sure you're approaching it like you're going to partner with the schools, and then hopefully you can come to a solution and take care of that, okay? But ultimately, if kids are accessing things that are supposed to be blocked, just make the school aware of it. Just say, hey, you know, my child said that another student told them how to find their way around whatever to this game or to whatever, and just want to let you know in case you have to tighten down some screws or something. You know, as I was researching this, I just Googled it, and there's like kids who have YouTube videos showing other kids how to bypass Chromebook settings and limits and stuff like that. And so it's possible, it's out there. You know, if your kid wants to look for it, they can, you know, and they might be able to find an answer. And so just helping the school become aware, because again, they're overworked, they've got a lot going on. So just approach it like you're partnering with the school rather than fighting against them. Okay? So that's all I have for that question. Next question. Oh, okay. I grew up with cartoons like Dudley Do-Right, Snidely Whiplash, Rocky and Bullwinkle, Wile E. Coyote, Roadrunner, and even Donald Duck and Chip and Dale, which are all coming back, by the way. All of them had a certain amount of violence. Do you think that the violence in today's cartoons is different? I'm concerned that my grandsons are being, okay, so this is from a grandparent, are being desensitized by all the violence that they view in cartoons and the games that they play. So do you have anything you want to share on that?
Well, I used to watch a bunch of those shows too. In a lot of those shows, you know, they'd have violence, but it was kind of the corny anvil dropping on somebody's head. And really, whenever I was a kid, I had like 3 or 4 channels, and maybe I wasn't the cool kid with cable, but there wasn't a lot of cartoons to watch.
You and me both, brother.
Well, hey, we could have been friends back in the day. Anyways, I think now with streaming and with all the options that we have right now, the first problem is there's just so much content. And I think if you just watch any of the content, I think the violence is different because they're trying to get kids' attention, and falling on, the anvil falling on Wile E. Coyote's head doesn't really do it for our kids anymore, because that's just the world that we live in. And so now you have the world of anime, and you have like, my son likes Pokemon, and you just get into all these different things that the kids like to watch, and they just have so many options. And so in reality, it's even hard to keep up with what each platform has. And so I do think that it's a whole different world, clearly, but I think it's a way more violent world in the world of cartoons. And so even Craig was showing some of the things. Like, I think my biggest concern isn't necessarily the violence; it's what they're putting in there with the LGBT community and all that stuff. Because a lot of, like, Donald Duck, Darkwing Duck, and all those guys are kind of coming back and they're rebooting them, but a lot of them are throwing in the LGBT agenda. And so you're like, oh man, this is great. I love Darkwing Duck, or I loved this, or I love this as a kid. I want my kids to watch it. Then you realize, like, oh wow, they just kind of snuck that in. And so I think that's where, if you're just focused on the violence, I think that's where you could get yourself into trouble, because the LGBT agenda is in a lot of them. And so, I think me and my kids were watching Scooby-Doo the other day. I think even the older stuff, like, that wasn't there, but it's kind of scary in a way. Like, Gabe was scared to watch Scooby-Doo, so some of the older stuff was even kind of creepy. Like, Scooby-Doo was kind of, looking at it as a kid, Eric, were you scared of Scooby-Doo? Like, it's weird. Like, it is. So even some of the older stuff is a little bit, like, a little scary. But yeah, I think the biggest thing is of course there's more violence, but you got to watch out. Like, you don't just assume because Darkwing Duck's back. Anybody remember Darkwing Duck? I love that show, but don't
get dangerous.
Let's get dangerous. I've never heard of it. Wow. This row is not cool.
It's on Disney Plus. Go check it out.
Yeah. So, but I think I read a thing where that's coming back, and a lot of this, like I said, a lot of that stuff's coming back. And so before you just say, hey, kids, just watch it. This was great. I loved it. Well, you better watch it yourself, or you better, Google it and figure out what's in there, because, of course, there'll be violence, and, of course, it'll be more than what it used to be. But they will most certainly sneak in the LGBT agenda. That's been coming up a lot.
Yeah, for sure. And we talked about this a little bit, how it truly is desensitizing our kids in a lot of different areas. But certainly cartoons and games have definitely become more realistic and violent. We've come a long way from, a circle eating dots.
Pong.
So a dot and 2 rectangles, 2 lines. but like I can remember the first-person shooter game I ever played on the computer, Wolfenstein, and I know that they've remade it, and so I was going to compare what the graphics looked like from the first time I played Wolfenstein to what they look like now, but I could not show you what the graphics look like now.
It's different.
It's very different, very graphic, very violent, and so I didn't even want to put it up on the screen just because I know there's still young people in here. But truly, it has certainly changed, no doubt. The same goes for cartoons. But I believe that all tech is trending to more realistic, right? Certainly graphics are better than ever, nearly indistinguishable from real life. You guys are aware of do you guys know what a deep fake video is? Right, so they can, superimpose someone else's face on someone else's body, and it's hard to tell the difference. I mean, you can do that on your phone now through, Snapchat or Instagram filter or something. But it's certainly become harder and harder to distinguish between real life. But not only that, is the technology we use is becoming less and less obtrusive in our lives. It's getting smaller, it's shrinking, it's further and further out of sight, and so all this leads to these blurred lines between the virtual world and the real world. And so, not only does the availability of realistic violence desensitize us to it, but it also draws us further into, the big thing now is the metaverse, right? This virtual world that Facebook's creating, where you can spend real money on fake things like skins and bundles and gem packs and NFTs. I'm still not really sure what those are, but it's all of those things are pulling us away from the real world, right? Things are becoming more and more temporal than they were before, and that draws us away from setting our affections on the eternal things. And ultimately, I believe that's part of Satan's goal. And we talked about that and how he's using this in our world and our kids' lives. And so that realistic side of things is pulling us away from the real world. It's more enticing, it's more exciting than what's going on in real life, and because of that, we're losing focus of why God has left us here. So
yeah, and if you're not a gamer, like maybe you're an adult and you're not a gamer, the big thing is how real can we make it? Which means, you can be, like I walked by when my kids were playing Madden the other day, and I was like, my first thought, I don't know why, I knew they were playing it, it's like, how are they watching a football game? Like, it looks that real. And so you start really looking at it and looking at the fans. So now imagine playing a war game like Call of Duty, or imagine playing a game like Battlefield, or like the hugely popular game is Resident Evil. And so, like, don't let your kids play that. I started playing it once, and it freaked me out.
Scarier than Scooby-Doo.
It freaked me out. I seriously couldn't play it. I'm like, this game is freaking me out. Like, I'm trapped in a house. It was weird. But the idea is how real can we make it? And the realer that it is, the more that they will sell, because they know, like, we are at the point now where if you come out with the old school Wolfenstein, just the old school people will play it because it's nostalgic. We will want to play NES or Super Nintendo. Our kids think it's kind of cool for a second, but they want reality. And the technical world and the gaming world is giving them reality. And the next step is, everyone has probably heard of the Oculus and the VR. That's the next thing that is really starting to take off, because eventually the consoles will be obsolete and it's going to be all virtual reality. And they're getting better and better at that. And, they want it to be as real as possible. And so take your imagination with wherever you want to go with that. And that's what they want to do.
Yeah, for sure. They're not really limited anymore. I mean, we talked about tech amplifying, and that's what it did even way back when with those cartoons. But looking back on those cartoons, with the technology we have now, we would say that they were limited. And probably 50 years from now, if we last that long, the technology that they have then, as they look back on us now, they'll say, oh, they were so limited in their technology. Look how much more realistic it is now, And so we're all headed towards those dystopian futures that we keep reading about, or we just need some young teen girl to save us. That's what they all seem to be. Some Katniss Everdeen, or what's the Divergent one? Anyways, I don't know. I've watched the Hunger Games, and I've read the Hunger Games. Wow. Moving on.
That's impressive.
This next one's for Josh. What is esports? Is it good or bad? What is mobile games, good or bad? What apps do we need to avoid?
Has anybody ever watched esports in here? Okay. So mostly young kids. And we talked about this with video games, esports, and so the definition that we had was esports describes the world of competitive, organized video gaming. And so what esports is a bunch of professionals playing video games while people watch them. And so it's different than streaming where a guy just gets on and you give him your money, and if they're really good, they pay money on Twitch or whatever. Esports is the best way to describe it. I'll use the NBA. The NBA has, obviously the Cleveland Cavaliers, and you have like the Miami Heat and all those teams. Well, 23 of them have an esports team as well. So the Cavs have, I think it's the Cavs Legends. And so they have an esports team where they have 5 guys who play on a team. They hold a draft every year. Like I think it's a 2-round draft. And so they're drafting. It's true. It gets worse. They draft players, and so these are guys who have created their own players in NBA 2K, whatever, and they somehow have moved up their rankings with their My Player, and so they get drafted, and they get paid really good money. I think it was like $60,000 just to play a season of 2 or 3 months, which is good for playing a video game. And so if you watch one of these things, they have sponsors. So like if you go to the NBA 2K esports website, you're going to see that Bud Light sponsors them, Champion sponsors them, AT&T sponsors them. Like big name sponsors are sponsoring these esports game. And so if you go to watch it, there's actual announcers. Craig's laughing because he saw it the other day. It's hilarious. It's hilarious.
It was hilarious. Because the guy who was in the point guard position would never be a real point guard.
I was more impressed with the small forward, the 5'8", 250-pound guy who it just said his name, his number, and said small forward. And I'm like, listen, that dude ain't playing small forward anywhere but in esports.
The virtual world.
Yeah, but they make a lot of money playing this. So if you win, so you get paid for the season, and if you win the NBA 2K championship, it's like $60,000 a person, and the second place team gets $30,000. And so this is for like 3 or 4 months of just playing. And so, they have a big event. They call these guys down. They're walking down with their water bottles and their jumpsuits, and none of them probably really played a real game of basketball in their life. Maybe I'm being harsh, but if you watch the video, you'll understand. They have coaches, and while they're playing, they're commentating the whole. They have commentators, commentating the whole thing. And so we do, I have an example for you guys. Just go ahead and start rolling it. And just watch how many people are at these events, how excited they get. So this is an eSport FORTNITE event. Look how excited he is.
But also notice that ESPN has its own channel for esports. I think that's incredible.
It is now more popular than the NBA and MLB.
There's no way anyone beats him! Your FORTNITE World Champion! BUGHA!
We are back on Summoner's Rift for the 2019 World Final. Gets tagged, he's locked down, he's knocked up, he's dead! LWX is on a rampage. The Siva is terrifying. There goes the teleport. The king! Tian! You beauty! Gets the double kill! FUNPLUS, they've taken down the Nexus. They turn their attention to Wonder. Tian goes down. Burst kills Kimgoon. The Nexus is being focused. It's going down! And FUNPLUS Phoenix are your world champions!
But he's pushing him towards the danger zone. Oh, in the back swing! He's in range again! He's the Phoenix ahead! He's the Phoenix behind!
Oh,
he blocked it! Arslan's gonna get the tournament! Arslan, he's your Evo Japan champion!
It's gonna happen right now. Knee looking for this opportunity.
I'm holding my breath.
Oh! They trade blows.
Oh, man, that was a crazy trade. Arslan cementing his position as the best Tekken player on the planet.
17 damage in play. Desert Spear is going to come through, and Lion becomes the first woman to reach the pinnacle of competitive Hearthstone. She is your 2019 BlizzCon champion.
I want to say to all the girls out there who have a dream for esports, for competition, for glory, if you want to do it and you believe in yourself, you should just
hundreds of
forget your
hours.
gender and go for it.
The Shocker playing so aggressively, but Sinatra already has his meteor strike. And oh, beautiful! Cut out so much.
So that's esports. Announcers get really excited, and I think a lot of adults think to themselves, well, that's esports. Who possibly watches it? Well, stadiums of people watch it, and more people watch esports now in the U.S. than the NBA and Major League Baseball. The only sport that is watched more, and it's not even really close, is football. And so esports is a huge deal, and so this is why our kids are saying they want to grow up and be YouTubers and play video games, because this is the new up-and-coming thing. And so I was actually talking to a couple guys while we were playing basketball the other night, and the conversation was, it just seems like less and less kids want to play real sports. Less kids sign up, less kids are trying to do it, because the reality is more kids are on tech, and more kids are playing tech, and more kids want to grow up to be that than an NBA player. Now, the odds of you being that is about the same as you being LeBron James. Like, the odds aren't great, but, you know, these kids are watching these guys on Twitch and whatever, and in these stadiums, and they're famous, they're making a lot of money. I mean, we don't know who they are, but there's a lot of kids in the world who know who all those people were. And so that's esports. Is it good or bad? I mean, Garrett said terrible. I don't know if I'd lean towards the terrible. I think to me, it's like, I will never watch an esports thing because it's a waste of time. Like, why would I do that? But yet I will watch a basketball game. And so I think it really depends on the content and how much you're watching. I think it's a lot of it's just discretion. Like, do I really want my young kids watching Satan fight somebody? Well, no. But I'm also not going to let them watch a cartoon of
Unless
something
it's
like that.
Michael the Archangel and he wins.
I don't think that. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if that's. I don't know what to go with that one. But anyway, I think good or bad it just depends. I mean, we were watching for a brief period of time the NBA All-Star dunk competition, and Adidas put out a commercial, and so like you got to be. Did you see it? And it you know, you're like, oh, we're rah, we're motivating, and then it throws in, you can be a trans woman. Yeah, and it just threw it in like just randomly, and it's like, okay, well, I think the point I'm trying to make is we got to watch our kids everywhere, good or bad. I mean, you think you can watch the NBA All-Star three-point competition, and like now you really can't. You got to figure out how to get past the commercials, or you just don't watch it with your kids. And the same things with this. Like, if you're going to let your kids watch esports, know what they're watching, know if they're talking. In the NBA one, the guy did cuss a few times, and so it's like a 3-hour video, by the way, so it's a big deal. So you just got to watch what your kids are doing. And as far as mobile games, I mean, a mobile game is just any game you play on your phone. I mean, that's the definition of a mobile game. That's any game and it's big business. It's outgrowing consoles and all that stuff. And so most people in this room, adult or kid, probably play some form of mobile game. I'm sorry, Candy Crush is a mobile game, adults. So you would be, that's the great thing. So many people are like, I'm not a gamer, but they play games on their phone. They'll play Candy Crush. Well, you're a gamer. So I think a lot more adults are gamers than they think. And what was the last part of that question?
I don't know, your question.
Hey, it died.
What apps do we need to avoid?
Oh, yeah, what apps do we need to avoid?
That,
yeah, I covered that, and I went over a lot of them, and so you can pick up, it's one of the sheets, I think it was week 3 or 4, it was week 4 that we went over it. If you're a part of the Facebook group, you can actually go on and watch that, but I think as far as what apps to avoid, I mean, you just got to do your research. If you're willing to give your kid a smartphone or a tablet, you just need to know what's out there, because the reality is I gave a long list of apps that you should, not let your kids have. But for every app out there, there's 2 or 3 more just like it, if not more. Yeah, and that list will be obsolete in 6 months to a year. And so if you go and you would Google one of those apps and you just scroll down and you just keep scrolling, you realize that there's app after app after app. So, I mean, the reality is most of the app store you should probably avoid. So once again, you need to be able to lock your kid's phone down. You need to know what they have. And if you don't want to do all that stuff, then I would advise don't give your kid a smartphone.
All right, one last question, and then if you guys have questions you want to stick around, we'll stick around, but then we'll be dismissed if you have other responsibilities. But the last one we have is, are the effects of technology the same for children with intellectual disabilities, autism, etc.? how do you limit screen time if a device is also used for nonverbal children to communicate? So first of all, like, I'm no professional when it comes to this area for sure, and so I'm doing the best I can, but I'm not the guy to ask really when it comes to the effects of these. But when it comes to the effects of kids on children with developmental disabilities, some of the research that we've come across during this class is that the studies would suggest that there is a correlation to those issues, not what they would call a causation. So the screens didn't necessarily cause a kid to be diagnosed with autism or whatever. However, there is a connection to most kids with ADHD or whatever, and that the common denominator is screens. And so there is a connection between those things, and a lot more issues as well. And so some people would say, well, if the one constant in all of these cases is screens, then some would say that there is a causation of those things. However, the studies aren't conclusive in that, but there certainly is a connection when it comes to those things. And then, as far as how do you limit screen time if a device is also used for nonverbal children to communicate, I would say this is the perfect example of using technology as a tool rather than a toy, right? We talked about that. There's great ways that tech is used to help humans. Can you throw that picture up there, Landon? So, this little boy up here, he's hearing for the first time because of technology. You can see the look on his face. This guy over here is able to walk because of technology. This guy here, who's legally blind, is able to see his wife and kid for the first time. This little girl here is able to communicate through an iPad. She's nonverbal. And so, technology certainly, not all technology is bad. Some of it is very helpful. And so I would certainly say in this instance of these kids who are nonverbal, it's certainly a tool rather than a toy, a tool that we didn't have available to us in years past, right? Now, can they also use that same device to get their digital sugar fix like we talked about? Yes, I'd say that's certainly a risk, but you can limit those things without limiting their ability to communicate. And again, I'm not a professional, but I would assume that their developmental disabilities are due to some sort of limited brain function, some issue with their neural pathways that we talked about before. And so while we've seen how tech can weaken some crucial brain function and strengthen minor brain function, I would think that you would want to balance their tech use with exercises focused on strengthening areas of the brain that's required for higher functioning. So there's got to be a balance, I guess, is what I'm saying when it comes to that. So, should you limit their tech use? I would say you should limit some aspects of it, but certainly you don't want to take a child's ability to communicate away from them. And so that's just a trade-off that you're going to have to live with. And I would assume that's determined by their level of severity. So again, certainly not a professional in this area at all. There's people around here that are. I would talk to them if there's something personal that you're trying to figure out, or your child's doctor, whatever. But just from the study that we've done, the research we've done, that's how I would answer that. Okay? So it's 10 o'clock. If you have any questions and you want to ask us a follow-up, we'll stay up here for a few minutes and we'll be available. Otherwise, let me go ahead and pray as we wrap up our class, and you guys will be dismissed. So no training hour next week. The new set starts March 6th, and you'll be able to sign up for those today in the bulletin. But let's pray. Lord, again, we come to you, and we thank you, Lord, for your word and the way it is able to guide us through this life, regardless of what age and time we live in. Your word is eternal, and so it's given us all that we need for life and godliness, and that includes technology and screens and social media and everything. And so, Lord, I pray that we would cling to that we would be sensitive to your spirit, that we would rely on the church body that you've given us to help us get through this in a way that protects our kids, but ultimately in a way that leads our family to glorify you in everything that we do, and that includes the way that we use technology, God. So just help us with that. We need you. We can't do it on our own. Lord, we just pray these things in your name. Amen.